probate is the legal process for reviewing the assets of a deceased person and determining who the inheritors are. It generally focuses on a will. If there's a will, probate is all about making sure that the assets are passed out in accordance with the will. States also have laws of what's going to happen if you don't have a will. And this happens in most states like you would expect. It all goes to your spouse. If there is no spouse, it goes to your kids, and then so on and so forth to other family members. Um, but probate is one of those processes that a lot of people would rather avoid. It varies by state, but in some states can be pretty expensive. And it's a public process. So other people can find out what you own, what you were worth when you died. And it can be time consuming. I mean, it might take as much as a year for the heirs to really get what's coming to them. And so, for those reasons, a lot of people do what they can to avoid probate for part or all of their estate. It's interesting, though, in some states, it's not as big of a deal. Like when my parents went in and do their estate planning, they were basically told, no, this isn't worth trying to avoid probate. Probate's not too bad in Alaska. And we think you ought to just go through probate. Just get a will and go through probate. It's no big deal. And, so I had some questions about that because I'm the executor. But yeah, that was the way it worked out in Alaska. But that's not the case in all states. So some ways in which you can avoid probate. Well, one thing is you can give stuff away before you die, right? Particularly if you're nowhere near the estate tax exemption, you can give things away. It's very effective. Anything you give away before you die doesn't go through probate. There is a downside to doing that. You lose the step up in basis at death. It's sometimes better for you to die and your heirs to get it with that step up in basis than for you to give it to them before they die. Like, this is a big mistake a lot of people make. They put their house in their kid's name, right? Or they have both names on it and they think they're going to facilitate things. Well, what happens is, that step up in basis at death goes away. That's not so good. All right, here's another way you can avoid it. If you're just not wealthy, you don't end up having to go through probate. In my home state of Utah, the limit is $100,000, not including vehicles registered in the state. If your net worth is less than that, you don't go through probate. And so that probably isn't going to work for most white coat investors. I hope it's not, but that is one option. Here's another option. You can have joint ownership, right? In community property states. There's a few of those, most of them in the Southwest, but also Louisiana and Wisconsin. Anything that's acquired during the marriage is considered to be owned equally by both spouses, 50-50, and both spouses may pass on their share of property to their chosen heirs, similar to tenancy in common titling. You can have community property with rights of survivorship. You can have joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, right? So this stuff isn't going through probate because there's a right of survivorship. It goes to the person who has that right of survivorship. Tenancy by the entirety. You've probably heard of. This is usually something used from an asset protection standpoint. And so, but it also, obviously keeps it out of probate if it's going to that married couple. Okay, so basically, leaving something to your spouse keeps it out of probate. Obviously, it's a much bigger deal when the second spouse dies, but that works fine for keeping things out of probate. For a lot of things, you just need to designate beneficiaries. Your retirement accounts, annuities, life insurance policies, designated beneficiary, and that passes to them outside of probate. Doesn't have to go through probate. Even for taxable accounts, brokerage accounts, and bank accounts, a lot of times you can title them with a payable on death designation. So it just automatically goes to that person rather than having to go through probate. Sometimes it's called a transfer on death account. Another commonly used technique is a revocable trust. A revocable trust, you can put stuff in, you can take it out, no problem. You can use it however you like. Taxes on that asset are payable on your personal tax return. But the point of a revocable trust is it helps avoid probate. So anything that's in the trust is distributed in accordance with the instructions in the trust, rather than going through probate. So it's a good way you can get some privacy, maybe reduce costs, and distribute it, probably most importantly, faster after the time of death. Obviously, any other trust, an irrevocable trust, is just like giving money away, right? It's no longer yours, it's no longer in your estate, it doesn't go through probate, it's distributed in accordance with the rules of the trust. Now, you can get into some, more big ticket items to avoid probate, a little bit more complexity in your financial life, but you can use a family limited partnership or a family limited liability company. These sorts of structures also help to avoid probate. A lot of times they can facilitate estate planning. They may be able to help with estate taxes. They have some asset protection benefits as well. But those are kind of all the ways to avoid probate. When you think about estate planning, there's really three reasons to do it. One is to make sure your stuff goes to who you want it to go to, and make sure your, minor children are taken care of. You designate somebody to take care of them as well as somebody to manage the assets. The second thing is to, of course, avoid probate, particularly if it's expensive or onerous, or you really want that privacy. And lastly, of course, is to avoid taxes, estate taxes, but also potentially income taxes. Those are the purposes of estate planning. And, avoiding probate is often a motivation for people to do some estate planning.
The hosts of The White Coat Investor are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.